click record here. Let's share a screen. We're going to go from there. Oopsie. Not the right screen I wanted to share. Okay, so what we're going to do, guys, is I tried to boil this down. Chapter 14, political parties. I tried to make it as simple and straightforward as possible. Hopefully, I've been able to do this. I'm not going to go through everything. I'm going to hit those main topics and points. If you have any questions as we go through, please definitely make sure that you are adding questions to the chat box. So section 1 looks at the functions of political parties. So political parties are basically meant to be an organization, and that could be party leaders, that could be people that are holding office, and voters. Political parties are meant to kind of get all of those people to work together, and their main goal is to get their candidates elected to office. They are organizations. They unite people with a common goal. What's that common goal? To get their candidates elected. They find these candidates for office. They're going to go into local elections. They're going to look at local leaders and kind of elevate them into state offices. They're going to look at state leaders and try to elevate those more popular ones into national offices. But parties as organizations, they want to educate voters, but they want to raise money. You can't do any of this without having a little money behind you. So party identification, we've talked a lot about this year. This is the degree to which a voter is connected to the party. So if you are a very strong conservative, a very strong liberal, you are going to probably have a pretty heavy party identification with the Republicans or Democrats. We've talked about this prior too, but these bold-faced terms are ones that are good to know. Straight ticket voting means you look at your ballot and you vote down the line, all Democrat, all Republican. You vote for all of the candidates from one particular party. A split ticket voter looks at voters and votes for different parties or candidates from different parties for each office. So they kind of jump around. More often than not, the majority of voters are going to be straight ticket voters. Split ticket voting is not very common. So I included this graph that kind of looks at party identification over time, and you can kind of see that we are seeing a huge rise here in independent voters, that your Republican and Democrats kind of stay at about a third, but the independent voters are becoming more and more popular. However, you are seeing kind of this split here, where now you're seeing more and more Republican voters or Republican-leaning voters that are independents, but they lean Republican or lean Democrat. So those are those swing voters that candidates are trying to get their support, is they want those independent voters that typically vote Republican or Democrat. So Rachel's saying, since independent voters are becoming more popular, will split ticket voting become more common? Great question. Yes, it becomes more common, but typically those independent voters still will vote straight party for one office or another. So we saw that in Colorado primary, that basically said, hey, you know, you're an independent voter, third of the electorate's independent, but they still are going to align themselves with Republicans or Democrats. Hope that answered your question. Someone asking a question there?
And his other question to me is like, how do I raise cash? Like these two ultra short, these two short are supposed to buy cash. How do I raise cash right now? So my thought there was sell out of both, put 5% just that's what we want right now. 95.
I'm sorry, I'm having a really hard time hearing. Jordan, did you have a question?
No.
Okay, I muted you, Jordan, sorry. All right, so let's go back to this. So party platform. I've included this, the two links here to the Republican and Democratic Party platform because it's only voted at the convention. it's the last one that they have voted on is 2016. They will vote again on the one in 2020. But these party platforms are their positions that members of a political party will agree to. I would encourage you, if you know, in your own time, if you want to dig in, you can kind of see what Republicans and Democrats, what their ideals are on things like healthcare, immigration, taxes, law enforcement. It breaks down each bullet point and gives you a lot more detail. This is a majority of the work that candidates have at the convention itself. So how did we get here? How do we develop into these new political parties? We talk about times of party realignment, when groups of people who support a political party shift their alliance to a different party. So a lot of people will say, be very quick to say, Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. Well, absolutely, but the Republican Party of the 1860s was a lot different than it is today. A lot of people say, well, Democrats are the party of slavery. Well, absolutely, but you're looking at these party realignments where supporters will switch alliances or support of one party to another, and it happens during these times of critical elections. And I'll show you a couple examples here in a minute. Divided government, we've talked about this since chapter 3. That's where one party controls one or both houses of Congress and one party controls the executive branch. So you can kind of see that right now with the Democrats controlling the House and Republicans controlling the Senate and the presidency. So I gave you party and control. This is just a graph that comes straight out of the textbook. You can see those periods of divided government in 2000. You could see it again here in 2010, and Obama with Republican House and both Republican House and Senate in 2014 and 2016. So again, we talked critical election. That's where a majority party is often replaced by minority party. Sometimes it's sparked by national crisis. And we'll look at a couple of examples of that here in a second. And then party realignment. This party realignment happens during critical elections. So critical elections and party realignment are kind of different, but they're more related in the fact that realignment comes out of a critical election cycle. Give me 1 second. Sorry, guys. So the first one we looked at here was the Civil War. Republicans were anti-slavery. They elected Lincoln, and the Republicans were the party in power for about 60 years. Fast forward to the Great Depression. People were displeased with Herbert Hoover and elected then Democrat Franklin D. Roosevelt. We also see party realignment in Nixon's Southern strategy in 1968. You look at states' rights. He was a law and order candidate. He wanted to make sure states were more powerful than the federal government. He definitely supported more state power. So we looked at, here's the Electoral College map of 1856 and then 1860. So you saw a shift there from from Democrat to Republican. We've seen 1928 here with Herbert Hoover, and then to 1932 with FDR. So these are what we're looking at, those realignments and critical elections. Here in 1964, this is when Johnson released the ad of the Daisy ad. If you don't vote for Johnson, we're gonna all die in a nuclear annihilation. 1964, Johnson wins. But now we look here in 1968 with Richard Nixon. I threw this in here, polarization. Voters now dislike one side more than they support their own side. So it's not that they are heavy Democrats or heavy Republicans, but they just really don't like the other person. And we've seen that in election cycles. You have a lot of people that weren't like, oh, I really love Donald Trump. You had more people say, well, I really hate Hillary Clinton. So that's that polarization that we're going further and further apart, conservative and liberal. So I threw this in here, Florida politics by zip code. You can see the red areas here are your conservative districts, and your blue areas are going to be your liberal, and you're going to see those in Tallahassee, Tampa, Orlando, and in urban or urban areas are going to typically be lean more liberal just because of the diversity of those larger populations. So we're going to talk about a couple things here about how do we actually get to that point. We're in the middle of it right now. We have Bernie and Biden and the Democrats, Trump very clearly going to be the Republican nomination. But this word here, patronage, a job, promotion, or contract given for political purpose rather than merit. So we saw the patronage system that came up prior to that passage of the Civil Service Act, where, hey, maybe we should hire people that are the best for their job. We talked about a closed versus an open primary. Closed primary, only people registered with a party may vote, versus an open primary. And we saw that in Colorado. We have an open primary that voters can decide whether they want to participate in the Democratic or Republican election. So we have a sort of an open primary in the fact that independents can vote for one or the other. But states that you can change your political affiliation up until election day, those open primaries are, you can vote for either one, Democrat or Republican primary candidates. So we put this map in here. You can see open primaries and caucus systems by state, Republican primaries, Democratic primaries, and you can see your caucuses here. And now this is where I'm disappointed we don't have more time to go over this with third parties. In a general government class, in a class where we had a little bit more time, a little more face-to-face, I would want to spend a ton of time talking about third parties because I just really find them so interesting. But it's very, very hard for them to win. Okay, we do have independents, we do have third-party candidates in local and some state house elections, but it is difficult, if not impossible, for third-party or independent candidates to win federal or national elections. So third parties are anybody that is anything other than Republican or Democrat. And the reason why it is so hard is because of this winner-take-all system. Okay, so seats are awarded to candidates who come in first. So even if you win 51% of the vote, you get all of that support there. And then we look at proportional representation. Sorry, guys. Proportional representation would be legislative seats are awarded in proportion to the votes that win. So rather than the winner gets all of that support, proportional representation kind of goes where a third goes to this person and a third goes to the other person. This is for your own reference. The types of third parties, you might have gotten one FRQ or not FRQ, one multiple choice question about a type of a third party, maybe. So that's kind of where this information would come from. But those single issue parties, those are third parties that are focused on one particular issue. So the examples that we give would be the Prohibition Party. They wanted to repeal prohibition. Once prohibition was repealed, they're done. The Legal Marijuana Now Party. There's a lot of marijuana party, political parties out there, but in states that have legalized recreational, like Colorado, they won their issue, and so they're kind of done. Splinter parties are parties that splinter off from a major party, either Republicans or Democrats, and we saw that with the Bull Moose Party and Teddy Roosevelt. We see that with states' rights parties. But they kind of they splinter off from one of the major parties. And then ideological parties looks at overall change in society. They want to change some fundamental part of society. So the libertarians or the socialist parties are going to be those ideological parties. They want overall systemic change in politics. So they're a little bit more broad, and technically they stick around a little bit longer than some of the other ones. This is the big thing. Why do we even cover third parties at all? It's because of this. It's called the spoiler effect. What is the closest that a third party has come to a federal office position? Good question. Let me go through and I can show you a couple good examples of that at the presidency. I don't know every one that would happen at the state level or in Congress, like a House election or a Senate election. but we've had Ross Perot, Ralph Nader were close if you talk like sub 5%. But for the presidency, very, very few third parties have, I wouldn't even call it coming close. But here's what they do. They spoil the election for another party. So third party candidates typically or sometimes can pull support from one candidate and then give the election to another candidate that may not have won because they pulled just enough. So the first and the best example of this is the 1992 presidential election between Bill Clinton, H.W. Bush, and Ross Perot. So HW is the incumbent at this point, and he wins in 1988. He's Ronald Reagan's vice president for 8 years. He now goes in, he wins office in 1988. He's running for a re-election in 1992 against this guy, Bill Clinton. Ross Perot, who just passed away at the end of last year, really, runs as an independent. He is a businessman. He's an oil man out of Texas. He does not get any electoral votes. He does not carry any states. But looking right here, he gets 19% of the popular vote. Okay, that's the largest percentage an independent or third-party candidate has ever received in any presidential election in the modern era. He has almost 20 million votes. Now, I'm not saying all of Ross Perot's candidate or all of Ross Perot's supporters and voters would have gone to H.W. Bush, but probably 6 million would have. Okay. Or probably more. So the idea is if you were not voting for Ross Perot, who would these 20 million people would have voted for? And would George H.W. have won re-election? We don't know, but that's the best example of a spoiler effect in the modern era is Ross Perot pulling about 20 million votes away from these two guys. Thus, Bill Clinton is now I think I muted myself. Bill Clinton wins presidency in 1992. So here's the 1992 Electoral College map. You can see Bill Clinton wins the blue states, HW wins the red states, but you can see, see if I can move my box here. The electoral vote, Clinton gets 370 electoral votes, but he only wins the popular vote by less than 6 million. Is the only reason why independents run is to spoil. No, they will never say that that's why they're going to run. And I think it's a lot of money and time to run to spoil an election, but sometimes they feel that their voice needs to be heard. Rachel, because of the spoiler effect, don't third parties cause the party most different from their ideologies to win? Gosh, that's a great question. That's a great question. I wouldn't say the furthest away, but sometimes they do. They pull support away from the candidate that more than likely their voters would have supported. Here's another example here. 2000 election, George W. Bush, Al Gore. So nobody's the incumbent. Everybody's running for their first term. Al Gore is Bill Clinton's vice president. George W. Bush is governor of Texas at this point. You can see that the popular vote, okay, Al Gore won the popular vote by about 500,000. It was really, really close. Okay, we did not know the results of the 2000 election until weeks after. And had we had more time, we could look at a little bit more of that. But I would, if you want to look at, there's an HBO movie called Recount. There's documentaries on the 2000 election, especially in Florida. But you can see Bush wins the red states, Gore wins the blue states. Gore is about to concede the election to Bush, and it all came down to Florida and Florida's 25 electoral votes. In 2000, Ralph Nader was running as a Green Party candidate, and he received 2.8 million votes, or 2.74% of the popular vote. So he did not get nearly as many. I mean, remember, Ross Perot got 20 million. He got 2.8 million. But there was only 500,000 vote difference between George W. And Al Gore. So some people say, well, would Nader voters have typically voted for Al Gore? Maybe they would have. Having remembered this was the first election I actually got to vote in, there were progressives out there that felt that Al Gore was not far enough left. if you can believe that. And so they supported Ralph Nader. They really, Nader supporters were looking to break this two-party system. They want to get more third parties involved, and however you look at it, the vote count was as close as it comes, with about 500,000 votes separating it. Most of those were in Florida. Florida's 25 electoral votes go to George W. Bush, not Al Gore, thus giving Bush the election. And then we can look at the 2016 election. You can see here, again, Hillary Clinton wins the popular vote, okay, by almost 3 million, okay? But then we start looking at Gary Johnson, the Libertarian. He got 4.4 million. You look at Jill Stein, 1.4 million votes there. These Libertarian and Green Party candidates, were those Libertarians, would they have voted Republican? Maybe. The Green Party candidates, would they have voted Democrat? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they didn't vote at all. The idea is to kind of say, like, why did third party candidates run? They run to get elected. Federally, do they have much success? Hardly at all. But you do see success, moderate success, in third party and independents in state elections. What are Green Party candidates? Green Party is a political party. It's a third party. So Ralph Nader was a Green Party candidate. Jill Stein was a Green Party candidate. They have candidates that run in every election. But the Green Party, I'd encourage you can look up their party platform online as well. They, typically they're looking at reducing penalties for nonviolent drug offenders. They're looking at increasing environmentalism and things like that. The Green New Deal, a lot of that has to do with the environmentalism and low controls on social things. Good question. So, a couple questions that we can ponder, and we could talk about maybe a little bit tomorrow or Friday. How did the modern two-party system develop in the United States? What are party realignments and when have they occurred? Again, going back to those graphs we look at with Civil War, Great Depression, Southern strategy. And then what role do parties play in American democracy? Those are just some questions to think about as we move forward. So, still recording here. That's like the bare bones bullet points of chapter 14 on political parties. My thinking, again, if you joined us later, is tomorrow I'm going to kind of try to alternate morning and afternoon sessions and see who's around. And if you can join us, great. Kind of looking at maybe around 2:30 tomorrow, checking in with you guys and see if you have any questions. And then Friday morning, we can do this 11 a.m. time. We can review the FRQ prompt for chapter 14, which is that argumentative essay. I included some links yesterday on the remote learning website and the main page, some of the stuff from the College Board. So if you scroll down and review those, every day, can't hear anything. Rebecca Brown, give me a thumbs up if you can hear my voice. Perfect, thanks, Rebecca. College Board has started doing daily tutorials. I think for you guys, it's every day at 1. So let me just look here. Yeah, so the daily class schedule, it looks like at 1 o'clock our time, they will be doing like YouTube live and looking at voting rights, voter turnout, political parties. That's something you're interested in. Those are going to go on YouTube live every day at 1. Otherwise, they'll post the completed video there. All right, kind of off topic, Emma. My understanding is, yes, Emma, that AP test will count for college credit. It's an abbreviated test. Everyone's going to be taking some version of that. We'll know more information about what the test will look like on next Friday, April 3rd. So any other questions here before I kind of wrap up our time? Good to see your faces. Emma's got her kitty. Sup, Subal? Kind of clicking through here. It's just good to see your faces, guys. I miss you. I really wish we could be doing this in person in Lower F Pod, but we'll kind of play the game as it's outlined. Will the AP videos cover the content of the AP test? My understanding and what they shared last week in communication is that the AP test will only cover units 1, 2, and 3. So federalism, interactions between the branches, civil rights, and civil liberties is my understanding at this point in time. Whatever version of the AP test, what it will look like, that 45-minute take it home version. Yes, it will count for college credit. And will the AP videos cover that? Yeah, I think every day they're doing a different topic, and they've posted it, and I included those links there on the page. All right. Any other questions for the good of the order? All right. So like I said, I'll reach out to you guys tomorrow afternoon, see if you have any questions, and then Friday morning at 11, we'll go over the FRQ expectations. So until we see each other again, be safe, stay healthy. If you have any questions, please shoot me an email and reach out, and I will see you guys again tomorrow afternoon. All right. All right, guys, have a great day. I'll see